What's going on, everybody? Today I want to talk to you about whether you actually really need an expensive fly line or can you get away with a cheaper one. So when we're looking at fly lines, there's a very degree of what expensive means. I think for most people, an expensive fly line is anything we're looking at, I would say for $40 or $50. I would say $50 or higher. And typically, when we're looking at fly lines also, we're looking at what is the purpose of our fly line. In fly fishing, the fly line can mean quite a lot. It can mean the difference between your sink rate, how well it floats. It could be the difference of whether or not you're trying to get a sink tip at the very end. Are you shooting line? What is it? And so I think when we're looking at a generic baseline, it depends on the level of experience of the angler, how frequently the angler is going to fish, and also what the purpose is. Different conditions kind of call on different levels of, I guess, lines to really showcase themselves. So when we're looking at the average weekend warrior, there are two trains of thought. The first train of thought being you fish infrequently, and the streams that you fish or the water that you typically fish is usually, fairly short. You're not having to bushwhack your way there. I think you could definitely get away with fishing an inexpensive line. The thought process there being if you're fishing an inexpensive line, you're not going to notice because of your lack of ability or care. You're not going to notice a big difference between a $20, $30 line and a $50 or $60 line. Now, if you're beating that line up and you want to have it last a little longer, sometimes an expensive line can suffice and do a lot better in that regard. But on the flip side of that, when the whole you get what you pay for camp, you also then deteriorate that fly line. And over the course of time, if you're only fishing it infrequently, you're going to replace it far less often because you're not fishing it as often. But when you go to replace it, if you're replacing an expensive fly line, it's another higher cost. So you have to factor in you're burning through the fly line because of how infrequently or frequently you're going to fish it, but also the level and length of how long it's going to actually last is somewhat dictated on how you care for it rather than the actual fly line itself. So some things to think about. Another thought process is some fly lines are made in the same factory as other ones, just the name changes how much things cost. There are specific tapers for fly lines that are unique to certain companies, like whether it be a salt-specific, transparent intermediate line or a sink tip line or a super deep sinking line, full sink, depth charge. All these things can factor into how much a line costs, but if you can get away with an inexpensive alternative, I bet you it would perform similarly. But again, you have to think about, is the line going to hold up to the conditions you need it to for as frequently as you need it to? You can always say, buy as expensive as you can afford. But also, as a guide, I typically go with either middle-of-the-road or inexpensive fly lines for client rods, and I just take really good care of those lines with conditioner and cleaning them. And I've never had anybody complain. In fact, I cast those lines frequently, and they hold up just as well, if not on par with some more expensive lines. For certain types of fly line too, like I find my weight forward lines or my double taper lines, I can get away with an expensive fly line, especially small stream, because I'm looking at shorter casts, longer leaders, and so I'm not looking to have an $80 super fine fly line that I'm going to be stepping on and ruining on these bushwhacking adventures, whereas my small stream adventures where I'm going to be I'm going to be having more of the fly line out, it matters more so. For bass and for other less spooky fish, I probably would invest in a cheaper line. But for permit, for bonefish, you probably want a line that's not going to startle the fish as much. And that comes down to casting, the personal angler. But just putting some thoughts in your head as to, well, what is it you need to get out of the fly line? Do you want longevity because of how frequently you fish a line? Or do you want the frequency of the line being bashed around in the conditions you fish? You want a cheaper line that you can take care of until it's dead, and then you just replace it with another cheaper line. I don't know the right answer. I hate to be that guy, but I think it depends on your own personal budget and how well you take care of your fly lines. If interested, I have a video that you can check out on how I personally take care of my fly lines. I feel like I do a pretty darn good job at it, and it allows my inexpensive lines to perform well and my expensive lines to last longer. So I'll link it below and you can check that out. Hopefully you liked the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Awesome apparel dropping all the time for my fly fishing lifestyle apparel line. And so please check that out. But until next time, guys, catch you guys on the flip side in tight lines.